they can manage the city.
Chef Koinange live every Wednesday, 9 p.m.
Welcome back, and thank you for keeping it daybreak now at the beginning of this week on Monday, the 3rd of October 2022. There was a special cabinet meeting that was chaired by President William Ruto. One of the key highlights of this particular meeting was the lifting of the ban on genetically modified crops. This was after a 10-year suspension. What this essentially means is that going forward, there is going to be an allowance of the importation of food crops and animal feeds that are produced through biotechnology. But of course, there's a lot that has been discussed concerning this, some raising safety concerns, others reading a diplomacy thread into it. But then again, what is lying in between the lines? That is what we'll be engaging our panelists this morning on this particular conversation. And
we have Kipruto Arap Kirwa, former minister in the Kibaki government. Good morning. Thanks for your time and company. Dr. Roy Mugira is the Chief Executive Officer of the National Biosafety Authority. Thank you for your time. Good morning. And Sylvester Anami is biotechnologist, and your time is all appreciated. Gentlemen, and may I begin with you, Honorable Kipruto Arap Kirwa. The reluctance before and the acceptance now, where do you draw the line, and why do you think is the reason?
Well, there are a number of issues that one needs to put into consideration. And I'm here not even as a former minister, but as a concerned farmer. Concerned farmer in the sense that a number of issues that have not been addressed need to be addressed, including issues of safety, issues of exhausting food security considerations, other than embracing GMO without looking at the harmful effects it can cause on our environment. The third and most important is that do we have the requisite mechanism to ensure that whatever gets into this country shall be properly labeled, given the fact that there is rampant presence of fake commodities that have gotten into our market, including herbicides and pesticides, which are causing a lot of concern to many Kenyans. This therefore means that the information available to the current cabinet, if we can consider it so, given the fact that most of the ministers are on caretaker capacity. And therefore, under Section 148 of the Constitution, when William Ruto was sworn in as a president, the deputy president, if there was one outside Rigathi, would have ceased to be the deputy president, and therefore formation of the cabinet includes the president, the deputy president, and ministers. This therefore means if there was somebody to take this issue to court, for lack of effective presence of legitimate authority to sanction it, that would pass with passage of time.
You mean, Honorable Kirwa, President Ruto's cabinet?
Yes.
That's what you mean?
It's on caretaker capacity.
Okay.
And therefore, when you're on caretaker capacity, you don't make certain decisions. That's why even the expenditure has been curbed. Their travel has been almost minimized. But more important is the issue that we would have expected. I'm happy the biosafety expert is here. And as a CEO, we'd want to see which other mechanisms have they put in place to ensure that what gets into our market is safe for our people, is safe for the environment, and is safe for other crops. Who is going to be handling this? Is it going to be mass production, or is it going to be produced by Wanjiku, who is going to contaminate Nafula's field without the authority of Nafula? There is enough evidence all over the world that these things have happened. We celebrate, after a few years, celebration turns into a funeral.
All right, I'll come to you, Roy. I know you're part and parcel of this long journey that has seen us get to where we are as a country. But, you know, there's already concerns that have been raised regarding this decision. The other day, a section of members of parliament allied to the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya yesterday actually spoke about why President William Ruto had to make this decision with the outgoing parliament, and of course also looking at the issue of public participation. They were asking why was this decision arrived at without involving members of the public. Tell us a bit about your reactions to this and also your take on the decision by cabinet on Monday.
Thank you, Safi and colleague, and thank you for having me here. The journey that has come to culminate on the decision that was made on Monday did not start last week or 2 weeks ago. The ban that was instituted in 2012 has had its effects on the production and the development of modern biotechnology. But I want to take us back a little and recall that in 2015, His Excellency the President, when at that time serving as Deputy President, in one of our conferences, made a commitment to have the ban lifted in 30 days. So the conversation about lifting the ban has been long. And we made several presentations as technocrats in the area to cabinet, previous sittings, to explain that the concerns that were raised by the task force that was established immediately after the ban have been addressed. The task force raised about 5 concerns or 5 areas of improvement, all of them touching on capacity, which again, Mheshimiwa Waziri is pointing to. And we made at least 2 formal attempts to say we are now okay, we have addressed the 5. But in those previous 2 attempts, we did not get what we were asking, possibly in the realization that we aren't yet there, just as Waziri is putting it. Okay. So this time, we took the report that came from Professor Dhairo's task force and highlighted the capacities that have been put in place over 10 years. And this is what convinced cabinet. So I may not be able to comment on why this cabinet or whether it is legitimate or not. That is beyond my scope. But I believe that it is this presentation that convinced cabinet that now we have the requisite capacity, as was pointed out by the task force, and therefore this is time to lift the ban. One other thing, Safi, really, it is not like water in a river that had a blockage, and now we are opening, and therefore floods will come sweeping all of us. That is not the case. Allowing importation is allowing Kenya to become part of the global biotechnology enterprise. And the approvals and the importations, the cultivations will still have to come through us as the regulatory authority, working with 8 other regulatory agencies. Right. So it is not a floodgate has opened and therefore things will flow in. We will still have to look at the safety of every commodity that comes in that is cultivated in country on a case-by-case basis. Okay.
So tight regulations is what you're talking about?
Yes.
And when you mentioned the task force, then, a report, that was in 2015, when the President Kenyatta's government was in place then, 2 years after it was, it ascended to authority. What then do you think might have not convinced the cabinet then because of the task force's report and convinces the same cabinet now, which is outgoing?
The building of capacities that were appointed in the 5 bullets has been progressive. The task force made their report in 2013, not 2015. It was actually a year after the ban. And therefore, capacities have been building over time. I said we made 2 attempts within that space, but all those were not able to show that the capacity is sufficient. So it is, I don't know how to put it, but this time, you know, something has to happen within a particular period. This is the time that we made the presentation, and this is when it has found home, that this indeed is adequate.
I'm coming to you, Anami, to give me your sentiments, but I'll go back to Waziri. I'd like you to weigh in on this matter. Does it concern you, you know, that the president made this decision now, and using the outgoing cabinet, and also the lack of public participation concerns that have been raised? Are these issues that concern you also?
Yeah, first of all, this is even bigger than amending the Constitution. This is an issue that is going to affect our lives, whether we are involved or not, whether it is going to be good in the long run, but there is so much fear instilled, even among those who are professionals in the same field. This therefore means effective public participation would have dissuaded some of those who may be seen to be skeptics about the embracing of GMO. Number two, it is important that the entire society is involved, including the leadership, both from the opposition and the government side, and also public information. Because you realize whenever there is lack of public information, there is likely manipulation by those who may wish either way, for it or against it. But finally, which is really very important, in the same recommendation by Professor Dairu, there were other components of ensuring that we improve food security. One is reduction of post-harvest losses. Two, issue of water use. Three, issue of embracing indigenous crops and improving biodiversity within the ecosystem of farming. Now, I would want to hear, as you embrace GMOs, have you done anything to reduce the challenges that were also highlighted by the same report?
Okay.
These are very pertinent in the sense that, yes, GMOs may be useful in the long run, but are you addressing the really basic issue, or are we addressing the market for the international community? Because it means, and I want them to challenge me, that we shall be getting the seeds from these individuals or these companies, we shall be getting the herbicides and the pesticides from the same companies. And the research information that we have is being generated by them as the primary level. And therefore, our researchers here at CARI, of which I had the privilege to be the Air Minister, was doing research on the basis of the seeds that had been given by some of these international organizations. This is where I find myself at a loss. And why rush? Why didn't he wait until he has his own cabinet for him to be able to pass some of those decisions?
And you have mentioned the international global market. We'll be talking about that and the diplomacy around the same. That was towards the tail end of the Kibaki government, the Mkatanusu government, the Uhuru government, and now President Ruto's government. But Sylvester, may I come to you then? We have largely highlighted on the political question. We'll come to the economic aspect because it's meant, according to many who are in support of it, to address drought consequences and against the backdrop of climate change in the world. But talk to us about the science that informs these two very critical economic and political decisions.
Yes, so thank you very much for inviting me to this particular panel, and also I would like to thank the President for having taken this decisive decision to lift the ban on the importation of genetically modified foods. Now, the most important thing about this science is that it's not the only science that can actually assure food security in the country. As former Minister Kira said, there are other options to be able to improve food security in this particular country. But now on the issue of lifting of the ban on GMOs, it's very clear that there have been challenges in this particular country, especially slow growth of our economy, stagnation because of the regional inflation. We have severe droughts in the country, at least in 23 counties. We have, in fact, war in Ukraine that has actually disrupted supply of food. So if you look at all these factors, and we have also another tool, which is actually the allowing of importation of genetically modified foods in order to be able to help our brothers and sisters who do not have or who are not food secure. I think that is something that we need to applaud the President of the Cabinet and also the government for doing the right thing to ensure that the cost of food comes down because there's that increase in cost of food in the country.
Mm-hmm. Let me just take you back a bit. We're all talking about genetically modified foods. There's been a lot that has been said, true or not true, myths, fears here, there. Take us back to the basics. When you talk about GMO, from a scientific perspective, what are we talking about?
So when we talk about GMO, it means, in a nutshell, that we have two organisms. One can be a plant, and the other one can be a bacteria. And each of these organisms have cells, which are actives. And within their cells, they have a larger molecule we call DNA. Now, if you take part of the DNA from a bacteria and introduce it into the DNA of a plant, you completely change the genetic architecture of that particular plant. It becomes modified, and that's what then we refer to as genetically modified plant in this case. And that's the basic science.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So by changing the DNA, how do you explain to the Mama Mboga, the person who is watching this from the remotest part of this country, why we need to divert from the natural way of life, the way things were wired to be, for us to go that direction? And how do you explain to them that this is important, that this is safe?
Yeah, so to Mama Mboga, in my opinion, of course, it's true that Mama Mbogas have been facing challenges, agricultural challenges in this country. And the challenges range from, for example, diseases and pests that affect their crop, immensely reducing productivity and production. So, and in fact also, for a long time, we've been having selection of, let's say, plants so that they select those that they prefer and with the best qualities. So for the Mama Mboga, the introduction of the genetically modified genes or plants is very much important because they will have to control pests without using chemicals, they will have to control diseases, and then also if they are challenged by the impact of climate change, there's a possibility that they can be able to plant crops that are resilient to conditions like drought stress. And that way, the Mama Mboga will have to realize improved yields, productivity, and also have sufficient amount of food to eat that is healthy and also in addition to being safe in most places. And that's very important to appreciate the fact that genetically modified foods are not poisonous. Mm-hmm. It is completely safe, and we welcome the concerns that those who are opposed to the GMO, they can talk to us. We can actually convince them that these foods are completely safe.
Before I come to Roy, Honorable Kiprotorap Kirwa, does that address your concerns and the concerns of many of the constituency that is against the GMO?
Yeah, to a certain extent, I don't want to refer to it as intellectual arrogance. Mm-hmm. But suffice to say the following. I would expect Dr. to take us through the process because there are the science is so broad. We start with the hybrid in Kitale, and I had an officer called Dr. Ocheng, who was a maize expert, where you are bringing two lines with certain values that you desire in either of the lines, and you cross them. That's where you get the hybrid. That is still advanced in terms of science. There is also tissue culture that my good professor Esther Kahangi was doing in his university, where you bring a tissue from a parent plant that you feel it has desirable values, then you put it in a culture for multiplication of the same. It's like now, you don't want short people like me. You remove somebody like him, you clone so many of Sylvester, so that at the end of the day, we have the certain height that is desirable. That is as far as plants are concerned. Now, when you go to GMO, it is slightly more complicated because what you are doing is that you are changing your thumbprint that identifies you from me. And you are now doing engineering of the DNA, almost setting it on a route that is not the natural path. And that is what makes us so worried. It has happened before. In India, and I hope they will answer us, some of the food stuff, some of the stock that was fed on sheep made the sheep to die. And many farmers committed suicide. Why? It is because in the basic pesticide that was used to kill caterpillar, in that there was some residual presence of poison that poisoned the rumen of the sheep, and the sheep died in India. How do we mitigate such issues? In Burkina Faso, they celebrated production of cotton. At some stage, farmers produced cotton whose value could not be used for cloth, and a lot of it was stuck. It was not exported. The government had to compensate the farmers.
All right.
In South Africa, for example, the maize they produce, because South Africa is the only country in the continent that produces maize for livestock, that is the yellow maize, GMO maize, and produces the other maize for the rest, who are not necessarily from the same race. I'm not being racist. So these are genuine concerns.
All right.
Can they address these concerns so that they make me go to bed tonight feeling my children are safe?
Okay.
Mugira, I know you have a lot to say concerning this, but allow us to take a very short break.
Thank you.
Allow us to take a very short break, and then we will give you a chance when we come back to address those concerns. We hope that the children of Waziri Kirwa tonight are going to go, to bed feeling safe. This is Daybreak. In case you're just joining us, the big conversation this morning, we are talking about the GMO debate. We have a panel of 3 in studio with us, helping us to understand the dynamics of the decision by Cabinet on Monday to lift the 10-year ban on the cultivation, importation of genetically modified crops in the country. Do stay with us.